Hello, everyone at Flight Sim Expo. Calum here. Firstly, I'm so sorry I can't be at the show today. I hope you're all having a fantastic time. From all the news that was happening yesterday, sounds like an awesome show. Lots of cool things to try out, especially all of the hardware. Yeah, I hope you have a fantastic show. Anyway, enough about the show and a little bit more about today's presentation. So hopefully you're all ready for takeoff. It's a little bit weird kind of talking to myself. So I'm sure I'll get used to it over the next 40 minutes or so. But today's presentation about how to get started in flight simulation will hopefully just be a kind of an introduction really into how to get involved in flight simulation. And if you've been at the show all weekend, or if today is your first day, then hopefully this gives things a little bit more context and hopefully a little bit more information to really help you understand the different simulators and so forth. But I will go through pretty much everything that we're going to cover today in just a second, but just a little bit more about myself. So my name is Calum Martin, and I've been simming since 2001, so about 20 years now. My very first simulator was FS 2000, the one with like a Concorde on the front, and it got me hooked immediately. I remember flying with a keyboard and a mouse, which, by the way, you should never do. And it was an absolute nightmare. But despite all of that, I still loved flight simulation and have been hooked since. So I've worked also in aviation for the past 5 years as well, in countless different roles. So I've been cabin crew, I've been ground crew, I've been a trainer. So I've seen kind of more of that side of things. And I've also dabbled in a bit of real life flying as well. But my passion and my hobby is more about flight simulation. So I am the CEO and founder of SoFly, but many of you may also recognize and know me from being the content director and also co-founder of FS Elite. So I'll tell you a little bit more about SoFly and FS Elite in the presentation as well, when we talk about resources. But I just want to add one final thing, that all of the images in this presentation today are going to be from flight simulators, and many of which I've taken from the community. Except there's one problem. That image there is not from the sim, so I just need to fix that. And there we go. So let's have a look at what we're going to cover in today's presentation. So firstly, we're going to talk about where to start. I imagine if this is your first ever experience with flight simulation, it is pretty overwhelming. I'm sure you've seen plenty of sims out on the show floor, so many products, so many developers, so it is extremely overwhelming. So we're going to talk about some of the best places to start, where you can then begin your learning and then hopefully continue that learning and development as well. We're going to talk about the best sim for you. So there are lots of different simulators, more than just maybe the Microsoft flight sim that you've known a lot about in the news, especially lately. So there's lots of sims that all have their own pros and cons, and also the things that benefit them the most. So we're going to talk a little bit about those as well. We're then going to go to the next level about what type of content you should add to your flight simulator as well. And then finally, we're going to look at some of the best resources. So like I said earlier, there are plenty of resources out there beyond this presentation and beyond Flight Sim Expo that will help you learn and educate yourselves to get the most from your sims. And we're going to take a little trip through some of the best ones to start with. But the important question, where to start? Now, the simulator is probably the first thing I would decide upon doing. When I did this presentation last year, I did talk about PC hardware, but the feedback I got said that actually the best place to start is the simulator itself, because that will give you an idea of what type of system you would then have in the future. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the sim itself. And then we're going to talk a little bit about PC hardware and choosing the right hardware for your chosen sim. And then finally, we're going to talk about the add-ons. Again, what I mentioned earlier. Now, just a quick note on add-ons and the simulators themselves. The default sims are pretty good, especially the latest Microsoft one in terms of what you get as a base package. But the add-ons are what make them thrive. So you've probably seen many pictures or videos and stuff of really in-depth aircraft or airports, but those all come from add-ons. But again, just as complicated as picking the right simulator is, trying to find the right add-on is just as difficult and tedious as well. But again, there are lots of resources, and we're going to take you through some of the best ones as well to make your sim thrive. So as I mentioned, and as I mentioned earlier, and as probably in the brochure and stuff as well, today's seminar is all about those who are beginners to the world of flight simulation. And I know Evan mentioned yesterday in the opening presentation that 20% of you guys who have attended Flight Sim Expo this year are totally new to flight simulation. So you may have come in from flight simulation with the knowledge of one of the three primary desktop simulators, which is Microsoft Flight Simulator. But there are also two other ones as well, which I would regard as the primary desktop simulation platforms. And those are Prepared from Lockheed Martin and X-Plane 11 from Laminar Research. Now, if you're around yesterday, you probably saw Laminar Research announce X-Plane 12, but today we're going to focus on X-Plane 11 as that is the current sim and the one that's also available. Now, in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about each of these platforms, what their strengths are, and also which ones are best suited to you depending on the type of flying that you want to do. Because not everyone wants to fly jetliners, not everyone wants to fly GA aircraft. We all have our own kind of wants and needs in terms of what flight simulator is best suited for us. So let's start with Microsoft Flight Simulator. So firstly, without question, Microsoft Flight Simulator is the most modern, most recent, and in my opinion, the most accessible simulator available. What I mean by accessible simulator is, firstly, there is a lot of stuff already pre-packaged in the base model, from stunning looking cities to great looking aircraft, and also smaller things such as nav data and also the weather is all included in one package. But not only that, for accessibility, it's got different languages. You can plug in numerous controllers, such as your Thrustmasters, your Turtle Beach stuff when that comes out, and also your Honeycomb stuff, and it will just work out of the box. So for that reason, it's extremely accessible without having to fiddle with controls, and they're all set up to different aircraft. As I mentioned, Microsoft Flight Simulator also has really stunning scenery that uses global data to represent the world, and also a bunch of aircraft that are pretty detailed and fly fairly realistically using a very modern and dynamic flight engine. In addition, I feel like Microsoft Flight Simulator has a real benefit because it has thousands, and I mean literally thousands of freely available add-ons and also hundreds of payware add-ons for the simulator as well. Now, this is super impressive because the simulator is still very much in its infancy. So if we're seeing this amount of content now, imagine what we're going to see in a couple of years' time once developers are very familiar with the platform and the SDK. There are also many other elements such as realistic city imagery, live weather, nav data. Oh yeah, I mentioned all this earlier. That's included as standard. So these are some of the real strengths you get should you go down the route of using Microsoft Flight Simulator as your primary sim. Now let's take a look at Prepared. For many, Prepared is a very, very stable platform that has been developed over many, many years. A little bit of brief history on Prepared. So this is a brand new version of basically what was FSX or FS 2004. So if you are familiar with those platforms from the past and maybe you're coming back into flight simulation, then you're going to be very familiar with how Prepared looks, feels, and also in terms of the control setup as well. Now, not to say that it's still using the same kind of rendering engine as back in those days. Prepared version 5 in particular uses a brand new modern rendering engine, DirectX 12. And it also has new features such as the enhanced atmospherics, which you can see in the image in the top right-hand corner. Yeah. And all sorts of other new features as well, which make it much more modern and fast. So if you do remember the FSX days of very stuttery, slow frame rates, then those are mostly a thing of the past when it comes to Prepared, obviously depending on what sort of situation and PC you have. But the result is a very familiar experience if you're using those older platforms. There's also a vast support and array of add-ons, which mean you can find almost any type of aircraft and airport at a fairly good quality. Because this platform has been out for such a long time, developers are very familiar with it and also have had plenty of time to make aircraft for it. So if you're interested in jetlining stuff, then this really is a great sim for you. The other benefit of Prepared is it has seasonal textures, built-in scenario modes, and also advanced weather handling. So, excuse me. So Prepared is mostly used as a training platform, which as a result means there are lots of scenario-based elements you can do. You can set up different scenarios as well. So this is a really good tool in terms of training as well. And as I mentioned, there are some of the most advanced aircraft add-ons available for Prepared. And finally, X-Plane 11. In my view, X-Plane 11 is fantastic for virtual reality with smooth performance and frame rates. It also has a fantastic in-sim rendering engine for really crisp, clear, and colorful textures. And this, especially when it's combined with like ortho imagery, which is kind of an advanced skill. But the point being, you can make the world of X-Plane look really, really good, but still have that smooth fidelity, which is really important for VR. It also uses something called blade element simulation. Now, what I mean by that is, and I'm sure Austin and the X-Plane team can be a lot more descriptive than what I'll ever be, but basically it reads, the simulator reads the aircraft shapes and alters the flight dynamics based on that. So unlike other simulators where perhaps it's based on tables, the flight dynamics, this is actually based on a physical object within the environment of X-Plane, weather, environment, and atmosphere all have an impact on the aircraft and will adjust how it flies, resulting in an extremely realistic flight dynamic and also simulation for almost any type of aircraft. Also, X-Plane 11 has an impressively good freeware library of add-ons that are of an extremely good quality. There's a developer in particular, Mr. X, which I'll talk about later. He's made some amazing stuff that looks phenomenal. And there's also a great thing called the Zibo mod as well, which can turn the default 737, which is it's not great, but this Zibo mod turns it into a phenomenal experience all for free. And that is because of the power of X-Plane and the community that drives that simulator as well. So with an overview of those three core simulators done, I'm sure the obvious question is, well, which sim is best for my needs? As I mentioned earlier, everyone who does flight simulation has a slightly different need or desire for it. For me personally, I spend a lot of time in jetliner aircraft. I quite enjoy watching the aircraft go through the cruise whilst I may be at the desk working. Or if I want to, I can fly online with friends and load up the sim really easily. Now, before I show you the next few things, I want to just really raise an important point. It doesn't matter which platform you choose, whether you choose one platform, 2, 3, or even more. Every single platform has a real benefit and pro. I've seen a lot of times in the community, a lot of people comparing different sims, but it really is like comparing apples and oranges. You can't compare them. They're all different and they all have their own benefits. So if flight model and that realism is important to you, then I would recommend you go down the X-Plane 11 route. If VR is the type of experience you're going to want to do in the future, then I would recommend X-Plane 11. If you're brand new to flight simulation, and I mean you've never really touched a flight sim before, and you're trying to get the most realistic and authentic looking simulator, then Microsoft Flight Simulator is definitely my recommendation for you. As I mentioned earlier, it's got great accessibility options. It looks fantastic out of the box. And the other benefit of Microsoft Flight Sim is you can own an Xbox Series S or X and also use it on there. Now, I know people are going to say, well, that's not a sim if it's on a games console, but trust me, if you can buy a $500 box and get the sim to look as good as it does on a PC, then you're going to really want to have a look at the Xbox version because it looks phenomenal and you get a truly worldwide experience. And in terms of GA flying, if that is the type of thing you're going to be really, really interested in, again, my recommendation would be Microsoft Flight Sim. Now, whilst the flight modeling in terms of the way the plane flies may be better in X-Plane, again, if you're new to flight simulation and you really just want to have a look out the window and do lots of VFR stuff to see where like stadiums are or windmills and other visual points, the Microsoft Flight Sim has you covered for pretty much anywhere in the world, especially with its highly detailed photogrammetry scenery. Now, if you're like me and you're trying to fly realistic jetliners, then Prepared is a fantastic option to go. It's got a huge range of aircraft from a jetliner perspective that I would highly recommend. So if studying manuals or learning the intricacies of different aircraft is up your alley, then Prepared is definitely the way to go. And in my personal opinion, and this is very subjective, but I do feel Prepared has the best available selection of add-ons. And I don't just mean like the best aircraft, I mean in terms of the best variety of things you can add on. That said, all of these sims have a fantastic array of communities that are actively working on things, both for free and also as commercial payware products as well. So hopefully that gives you a broad idea of what sim would best fit your need. Now, of course, I'm sure there probably is some overlap for many of you in terms of, well, I want to fly a realistic jetliner, but also I want the best VR experience. And I think you're just going to have to weigh up what's most important to you at the moment, or take a look at, X-Plane's array of airliners and stuff, because they do have a really impressive selection that are VR compatible as well. But hopefully this is just an idea and a snapshot of kind of maybe where you should firstly dedicate your time before broadening your horizons. And as I mentioned earlier, just because you may download one sim and buy a few add-ons for one particular sim doesn't stop you from buying a second or third and getting involved in that community. I use all three simulators, each for their own strengths, and I have a fantastic time without feeling the need to kind of compete against which sim has the most time on my PC. There are some other platforms as well. So as I mentioned, those are really the three key and core platforms available right now for desktop simulation. Another fantastic simulator is Infinite Flight. Now this one's really unique because you don't need a desktop sim for it. You can use it on your phone, you can use it on a tablet, and you can travel the entire world from those devices on both Android and iOS. They have a really big community of ATC where you will be able to interact with real life people and fly all around the world in such a huge range of aircraft, from, like you can see on the screen, the A320, they're developing an A220, they've got big jetliners, smaller airplanes, and some of them now come with 3D cockpits and also 3D buildings, which again, if you think about it on a mobile device, is pretty impressive. And the other simulator as well, which is DCS World. DCS World is an authentic and realistic simulation of military aircraft and is amazing for aerial dogfights. So if you're a bit more of a competitive flight simmer or just want to have a bit of fun away from kind of maybe learning about the big aircraft and stuff, then DCS World is really, really cool. I fly all the time with some friends. We get involved, we do aerial dogfights, we do lots of missions. And the best thing is you can try it out for free. There's a free pack that encompasses a wide kind of area, and you can start off with a number of aircraft and you can have a really good time all for free. And if you like it enough, you can then expand your DCS World add-on content again, and yeah, continue having a blast in that sim as well. There are other sims as well. There's GeoFS, which is a browser-based simulator as well. But basically, there are so many different options and choices. This is just a handful of those that maybe I focus on because they're probably the most developed, I would say, in my opinion. But again, it's really up to you what you want to do with your simulation time. So hopefully now we've given a bit of a broad spectrum of which simulator might best suit you. And you're thinking, okay, well, that's great. I want to try out that VR, or I want to be a jetliner pilot. But how do you get started in the sim? So let's start with Microsoft Flight Sim. So firstly, where do you buy it? Well, you can buy it from Microsoft Store or Steam, and it costs $59.95 for the basic edition. There's a premium and a premium deluxe edition, and those models include additional kind of handcrafted airports, which are specifically designed and a little bit more detailed, and also additional aircraft as well. As I mentioned, it's also on Xbox Series S and X. And if you buy it from Microsoft's store, then you can use Microsoft Flight Sim on any of those platforms. So if you have it on PC, you can use it on your PC. And then if you have an Xbox down in your living room, you can boot up your Xbox, sign in, and continue flying from your Xbox, which is pretty cool. So when it comes to resources, these are places where I would recommend you first go. So if you're brand new to this particular sim, then go check out these resources. So the first one is flightsim.to. They are an impressive group of people who have literally hundreds, if not thousands, of freeware products you can download right now for free. And I'm talking not just like liveries, so different paints for the aircraft. I'm not just talking kind of small little airfields. There are some really complex and really in-depth looking airports, aircraft, utilities that make life easier. It's a fantastic place to just download free stuff and start to kind of expand your library and learn a little bit more about the community as well. So I'm going to mention SoFly as well. Me and my team, we've made a comprehensive guide. It's about 400 pages now. Hopefully that doesn't scare you off, but it's a kind of a step-by-step how to get involved into this particular sim. So everything from kind of the initial setup, getting the best performance, how to fly certain aircraft as well. And it's something we're constantly updating. So we released it last year, and we've released dozens of updates going from like 120 pages to now over 400. So hopefully it's a really helpful resource for many people. And if it's something you're interested, then please do. It's awesome. Well, I would say that. And then finally, the official forums as well for Microsoft Flight Sim. There is a really, really active community there. You'll be able to ask questions, get help from community members, and even the developers sometimes kind of jump in and answer questions. It's really cool. They also arrange like flying events. So if it's your first time and you want to maybe challenge yourself flying with other people online, then you can set yourselves up with that. But it's a really good starting place if you're brand new to this particular sim. So some of the feedback I had last year was also learning about developers and which developers people should pay attention to on each platform. So for Microsoft Flight Sim, there's a developer called the Fly-by-Wire Simulations team. They have released an excellent freeware A320 modification. So whilst I said prepared was great for jetliners, this modification does an impressive thing for free and actually converts the included aircraft and transforms it into something that's fairly good. And I'd highly recommend checking it out. And of course, as it's free, there's no reason to not try it out and get started with it if that's the type of thing you're interested in. Another developer I'd highly recommend is Orbex. They have a massive library of airports. They're kind of like one of the top tier industry standards in terms of creating airports and stuff. But not only do Orbex now obviously develop their own airports, but they also have a store full of partners and stuff where you can get a wide variety of different products from aircraft and scenery as well. Just Flight, another one I'd highly recommend. They have an impressive array of GA aircraft. So remember earlier I was saying Microsoft Flight Sim is good for GA, then that's a really good place to start. And then finally, Parallel 42 and the Sky Park. So discovering the world is quite the adventure, I imagine. And what the Sky Park does is it kind of gamifies it a little bit, but it's really cool. It allows you to discover new locations whilst building up some credits and some clout within this kind of virtual world. But again, go check it out. There's some really cool stuff there. And then just some miscellaneous information I thought might be worthwhile kind of mentioning again. So this sim is really good for the fact you can just jump in and play once you have downloaded it. There's no need for any external weather engine tools, no need for extra nav data. So if this is really your first experience in flight simulation, it's a great place to start. But if you're going to get started and prepared, you buy it from the Lockheed Martin website. There are 2 licenses available for general people. So there's the academic license and the professional license. I'm not the lawyer. I'm not going to tell you which license to buy. It's very much down to you to read which one is suited. But basically, prepared is used for training purposes. So just depending on your current needs will depend on the license. But essentially, they are the same simulator. It just depends literally how much you pay for that, depending on your use. In terms of resources, AvSim, fantastic freeware library for prepared, also has an engaging forum where you can interact with like-minded people. Also on the AvSim forums is a bunch of third-party developer like support portals. So if you ever have any questions about maybe some products, they'll be able to be there to help you. And in Facebook, there are a number of groups for prepared. And again, you can post pictures or post problems and people will generally come and help you as much as they can. And then again, the official forums is a really good place to start with prepared as well. As for developers, now I'd be amiss if I didn't mention PMDG or FS Labs. Talk about great airliners, and these guys have produced some of the best. So for PMDG, you've got a series of Boeing aircraft from the 737, 777, 747, and kind of a bunch of variants for each of those aircraft. When it comes to airports, again, Orbex have a huge library of airports. Aerosoft, again, huge library of airports. And between them, you'll definitely have North America or Europe covered, depending on kind of where you want to fly, or even if it was between both. Weather engine. So Prepared's in-sim weather engine is not great. So it does rely on a third party to offer a comprehensive solution. And I would recommend you see what Hi-Fi Sim Tech does. There's obviously a cost to it. It's not a recurring cost. It's a one-off, can't remember off the top of my head. But once you paid for it, you'll be then able to access a bunch of weather, both currently and also historically as well. So if you've ever wanted to try flying through a hurricane that you remember the date of, then you can go and try that out. And also Navigraph if you want to have a comprehensive set of charts and FMS data, which is really, really important if you're looking to fly with those big aircraft. And miscellaneous, again, just require a number of add-ons to look good. And both licenses are the same sim, which I've mentioned as well. And then Explain. So you can buy that from Lamina Research's website or on Steam for about $60. And in terms of resources, explain.org is a huge resource within the Explain community, forum, freeware library, and a store all in one. So if Explain is your sim, I'd highly recommend you start there. Threshold, they are a news website. They do a great job at covering all of the content from Explain 11 and Microsoft Flight Sim. They have a store and also a forum. And then surprisingly, Reddit is really, really resourceful for Explain 11. I particularly found a lot of helpful people on there, especially when I was starting out with Explain 11. So be sure to check out Reddit. And in terms of developers, so Flight Factor, who were on stage yesterday talking about their 777, which looks freaking awesome, by the way. They're a developer I'd go and check out. I9 Builds, again, two really comprehensive aircraft developers. There's also a bunch of really cool GA airplanes as well, again, from Just Flight that you might want to go check out. Aerosoft, again, huge library of airports. Again, a lot of them are European focused, but there are plenty of freeware American stuff as well from that developer I mentioned earlier, Mr. X. X Enviro, if you're needing to have a weather engine for X-Plane, that's a place I would start. And I've already mentioned the Zebo mod, which is a fantastic freeware to make that 737 awesome. And then in terms of any miscellaneous stuff, I mentioned earlier about auto imagery. So you can transform kind of the AutoGen world down below, and you can add real photo data on top of it. But that is quite an advanced thing. So I would really just focus on getting the sim, getting the aircraft, getting some airports, and then expanding your horizons that way. So the other point I want to cover is PC hardware and controls. Now, I watched Ken's presentation from Jetline Systems on Friday. Since you guys are there, I would highly recommend you going online and rewatching that. He answered a bunch of questions and gave some really good insight there. But if I were to kind of summarize PC hardware, it would be kind of down to these three things. So firstly, checking the simulator's recommended requirements. Do not use minimum. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your money. If you go for minimum, you're just not going to have a very pleasant experience. It's called minimum for a reason. So at least recommended. And if you are new to flight simulation and you just want to focus on being able to fly, then I would highly recommend PC builders, especially Jetline Systems, I think are there at the show. Go ask them about making hardware, not making the hardware, making your PC, because they can customize it to suit a particular flight sim or your needs. And also you're going to want to build to your budget. So build the best machine you possibly can to your budget and consider the long-term goals. So I put together a few little things about your PC considerations. So your CPU, GPU, your RAM. You want to use the latest technology, but I do appreciate how difficult and challenging it right now is to get that hardware. And again, like I said, I would really recommend you go and watch Ken's presentation from Friday's seminar. It covered a lot of this stuff. But if you do have any questions about PC stuff, then feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'll get back to you if you're watching virtually as well. So whilst I know that was quite a sweeping motion through PC hardware, I just want to talk a little bit more about control hardware. As I mentioned, when I first started doing this with a keyboard and a mouse, it just did not work. So I would definitely invest a little bit into some simple controls to get yourself started. So the Thrustmaster joystick and throttle packs, they have quite a impressive range of affordable stuff, which kind of gets you by all the way up to the more realistic stuff as well. Honeycomb, great if you want to be a little bit more practical, same with Turtle Beach, but also you can use an Xbox gamepad as well, especially if you're on Microsoft Flight Sim. It does the trick if you're just there to have a quick fly and a quick go. And then there's some advanced stuff. So I know this is for beginners, but if you're thinking, oh, this is great, but I want to go that next stage, then here are a few people as well I'd recommend. So Real Sim Gear, Sim Your Plane, Stay Level Avionics, and Virtual Fly as well. So again, whilst I know, or whilst I hope that those of you who are watching are beginners, there are some stuff you can continue your learning and stuff. And if you want to go really fully fledged, then you can also buy full cockpits as well in the future if that's something you're really interested in. I would say probably the best advice I would give is getting involved in the community. So flight sims doesn't have to be a solo hobby. There are so many resources out there and communities that are really able to help you get to grips with everything. So there are lots of media outlets. So here are just a handful of them. So got FS Elite for myself, Threshold, Helisimmer if you're very much into helicopter flying, PC Pilot if you like physical magazines, and a whole bunch of others as well. So again, take note of these. These are really helpful resources to find the latest news and product information. If you're the type of person that likes to learn new aircraft or learn about new aircraft through video, then there are a range of content creators I'd definitely recommend. Got the likes of Chewy, the Flight Sim Deck, Nick Flight X, Blue Game, Squirrel, Sizzling Popcorn, Oz Flight Simmer. They're all near dear friends of ours, and they're fantastic. And the great thing is some of these guys are real life pilots, so you'll actually learn some tools of the trade, as it were. But also you've got simmers as well, so they will just kind of almost speak to the same level as what you might be at the moment in terms of being a beginner and understanding the more simmy type of things rather than the piloting side. So as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of places you can download add-ons. So we've got the likes of Orbex, Aerosoft, SimMarket, FlightSim.com. Again, if you're looking to expand your initial offering of your simulator, then these are great places to go and buy those add-ons or even download the freeware stuff. And then finally, just some other resources that might help you with your flight simulation experience as well. So obviously you're at the show, which is fantastic. And I'm really, really pleased that if you're watching online or if you're at the show itself, you're able to soak in all of this flight simulation goodness. Another great resource is, of course, Flight Simulation Association. So the guys who put on this event, there's a lot of information there, some that we've contributed to, some that content creators have contributed to, but it's a very community-driven website, and you're able to find lots of cool insight and tidbits, again, to help you with your learning and understanding of flight sim. Discord. So if you're unfamiliar with Discord, it's a chat kind of resource, and there are lots of communities out there. Lots of them are really helpful, and you can have kind of instant real-time conversations with simmers and like-minded people. Facebook, go and search for those groups, search Prepared, search Explain, search Microsoft Flight Sim. I guarantee you're going to find a wealth of content through Facebook. And even if it's not information, it could just be some images to inspire you for your next flight. AvSim and also VATSIM. Now, I'm not going to talk about VATSIM. It's an online network, which is going to be covered in a seminar following this one. So the final thing that kind of leaves me to say, and I know this has probably been quite the whirlwind of information for you. So if you do have access to this, I would watch it back. But please go and explore that show floor. Go and talk to people and watch the other online seminars. I've watched them throughout the entire event. They've been absolutely amazing. Kudos to every single developer and presenter. Everyone's done a really awesome job, and it's been super educational. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in learning a little bit about flying online, then go and watch Sebastian's presentation straight after this one. And also, the best piece of advice I can give is, when you are in the cruise or you are flying from airport to airport, then continue on those different websites I've recommended to continue your learning. The more you kind of jump in, the more you can absorb, and the more familiar you get with kind of terms and developer names and quality of developers and stuff. And then finally, just stick with it. It's very, very challenging. I get that. And there are many helpful communities and people out there all wanting to help new people coming into the world of flight simulation. And even if you're not new and you've been in this community for a little while, we're always learning. I don't know everything, and everyone else at this conference doesn't know everything. So that's how we do it best. We just learn. So I'm going to take questions in the virtual chat after this presentation. So if you're watching online, please type away your questions and stuff, and I'll get back to you. If you're at the show watching in person, then feel free to contact me at calum@fselite.net, and I'll reply to your question or send us a email. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and enjoy the rest of the show.